Sarah Palin.
Ryan Donald Trump Jr.
Harsh to NC. Hey, everybody, I want y'all to check out a fellow Marines podcast.
My name is Ted Nugent, and I got a call from my buddy Ryan F. Samuels, and he wants me to tell you that he's a working hard, playing all-American son of a who is celebrating God, family, country.
Welcome to the Ryan Samuels Show, one of the top political podcasts in the United States, where we have a healthy distrust for government and mainstream media. The Ryan Samuels Show is a raw, unfiltered look at American politics. Follow on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Here is your host, Ryan Samuels.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Ryan Samuels Show. Tonight, we are going to talk about Dr. Fauci called before the Senate again after Senator Rand Paul released his private diaries to the public, which we covered a couple of days ago. You can go back and look at that show. We kind of read it almost line for line, or at least most of it. So there is massive public outcry against Dr. Fauci, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I understand the man served the country for years. You could call it service. I don't. I think he was employed by the government. That's a much different than service, where you volunteer for the military or you run for office and serve in some sort of capacity. It's a far cry and a far stretch to say that Anthony Fauci served his country, but he worked for the government for a very long time. I think he used it to enrich himself. I think he did it all for himself. And I don't think he really had, I think maybe at one point, like most people, he was trying to do the right thing. But I think after a certain amount of time, when you're within a system and that system kind of becomes your culture and you get used to it and you start to compromise your values. And you start to blur the line between morality and duty and crime. We're going to go over it. He did something very interesting, which I knew was coming. I think I actually said it on that show, is he's just going to plead the fifth the whole time, and he should. That's what I would do. That's not going to be a popular conversation for you and us to have, but I will stand by that comment wholeheartedly and thoroughly and explain it in detail. Do not forget, you can call into the show, 561-786-2916. Let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your views. Should Dr. Fauci spend the rest of his life in a federal prison? Should he be given the death penalty? I see a lot of people calling for the death penalty. I am certainly not calling for the death penalty. I very rarely will. So that's the topic for tonight. Stick around. Do not go anywhere. Grab your popcorn, grab your kiddos, put it on the television, comment in the sections, hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and we will be right back. To really dive into this Fauci situation, we need to just remember how chaotic it was during the beginning of the pandemic. Now, I think back in 2015 and back in 2016, Anthony Fauci said that Donald Trump is going to have a pandemic on his hand. And some of the entries in his diary and other evidence suggest that they knew that Wuhan was a problem and that it may cause some serious issues for the United States and the world. But however, they failed to take appropriate action, obviously, because there was a massive worldwide pandemic breakout. But the pressure and the things, the government overreach that they did at the time was absolutely abhorrent. Here's the problem with government power. They will use it no matter what. In our society, in 2026, you can't stop them from using it. You can only create a grift. You can only create a rift, afterwards. So after the fact, after years later, after you refused to get the vaccine and you got kicked out of the military and you lost your job, or they put you in jail and arrested you for not wearing a mask at a public baseball game, or you had to show a vaccine passport to go to a restaurant or the doctor, all of this government intervention that was a complete and utter fundamental violation of your individual liberties. Once all of this happened, years later, you can file a grievance and maybe the government will say that they're wrong, or maybe not. Maybe guys who passed the policy get an unequivocal pardon from the president of the United States and will not face any accountability. And you don't get reimbursed for losing your job. No government officials go to jail for violating your rights, because the power of the government is such that it is too big, too strong, that it can crush the individual in a moment's notice over anything it wants to at any point it feels like it. And there is nothing you can do to stop it. You can create a grievance. You can call them before Congress. You can publicly shame them. You can yell at them, but it will not change this one and utter fact. And the fact is that people's lives were ruined. People died. People were forced to get vaccinations that didn't necessarily agree with their bodies. There's reports of people being harmed by it. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but these are things that we're hearing. It was so ludicrous that Steve Colbert actually did this opening of his show to try to convince people to get vaccinated.
The vaccine.
Idiot. Here's a guy getting paid millions of dollars to do what the government tells him to do what the pharmaceutical companies tell him to do. I mean, how many vaccines and how many boosters did he get? Look at this, everybody. The big applause signs in the audience. Now, this is serious. And everybody there is vaccinated because you had to be at the time. Oh, yeah. Look at that opening. Great, grand, awesome, amazing, everybody. All right. Now let me read from the teleprompter from a script.
And they said it couldn't get any longer.
Let me read from the teleprompter from a script that was provided to me by my writing team that I did not provide myself. Look at this. Okay, look, just here we go. Here's another one. Look at this.
Free fries when you get vaccinated. I got vaccinated.
Hmm.
You're saying I could get this? These delicious fries?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. But there's also a burger element to this? Let me check with Bill Neathart. Is it too early in the day to eat no. This could be breakfast? Okay. I want you to look at this and think about, again, some people love hamburgers, some don't. Really want to respect all ways of life. But if this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination.
Vax and a side of fries.
Vaccination.
New York City.
I'm getting a very good feeling about vaccination right this moment. Free fries.
Useful idiots. Bought and paid for. Bought and paid for. Now, the American people are furious because the American people did lose their jobs. The American people did lose their grandparents. The American people were not permitted to say goodbye to their grandparents or see their grandparents or have them come and see their newborn baby. The American people lost their jobs, were forced to stay home, couldn't do anything. If they wanted to see a grandparent, they had to wrap the grandparent in plastic so they could see their baby.
Put your hands in there. Put your hands in there. I love you. Squeeze her.
Turns out none of this worked. None of this was effective, like at all. The advertising campaigns were so ridiculous. People on the left started worshiping Fauci, praising him as some American hero or American legend, and he is actually soaking it up in his diaries, talking about how famous he is and how everybody loves him, and that's the only thing that he was interested in. Look at this. Here is another New York element to this. In the campaign to get people to take this drug into their body, against a lot of people's will, by the way. Listen to this.
Dr. Fauci, give us vaccines. Help all the people who have been quarantined. We'll wear our masks and we'll have to stay distant. We'll wash our hands and we'll be more resistant. Fauci, yes? Promise us, please. We'll have a cure that can fight off this disease.
No, you won't.
Restrictions will lift with some ease. Dr. Fauci, don't forget me. Thank you.
What the actual heck happened in this country? Now, there are people who still think he's the bee's knees. It's all over Twitter. Go to X right now and look up Fauci and everybody, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets talking about how Dr. Fauci is an American hero. He saved millions of dollars. He saved millions of lives. That is categorically, apparently, with all of the evidence that we now have between his diary and everything else, categorically untrue, right? This is going to be a show that's longer than usual because there's just too much to cover. I cannot cover this in an hour. We're going to probably push this an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, okay? The Senate was infuriated when Dr. Fauci came because he invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege. Now, I'm very surprised at Rand Paul. And if he's listening, I want him to listen. The Fifth Amendment belongs to you as a human being, anybody. You can invoke it however you wish, whenever you wish, under any circumstance that you wish. There is no scenario when you cannot invoke the Fifth Amendment. That was the intentions of the Founding Fathers. That was the intentions of James Madison, that you cannot be coerced into testifying against yourself, regardless of your current status. So we're going to get into this a little bit more later. I'm very surprised because Ron Paul is supposed to be the libertarian of the group, and he's kind of lost me here. Although I understand his argument, I understand he wants to hold Fauci accountable, and I understand that he can't because Joe Biden gave him a blanket pardon to pardon him from any crime that he may or may not have committed from 2014 to 2025. Anything. Now, Donald Trump has come out and said that he will honor that pardon, even though that he thinks it's problematic because it was done with an auto pen. I happen to agree with that. Here is Donald Trump being questioned about the pardon.
Well, the only thing you can really think about is the auto pen, because the most powerful thing a president has, they say, is the power of pardon. So he was pardoned by Biden, and I respect that. I know how powerful it is. It's a very powerful, they say it's literally the most powerful thing a president has. Now, whether or not I sign my things directly, always, almost everything I sign directly. You're witness to many of them. He signed very few. The only thing I know that he signed was Hunter Biden's pardon, but I'm not sure that he signed, he probably didn't sign this one. So I can't tell you what the law is. I've heard that you have to have a lot of proof. You need to have letters. You need to have all sorts of things, that the person operating the auto pen has to know exactly what it's all about. He didn't know what it was about because I saw him testify. So maybe there's something on the auto pen. Other than that, the power of pardon is very powerful.
He's going to respect the pardon. Of course he is. He's not going to overturn the previous president's pardons and then have his pardons
the only thing you can
scrutiny from future presidents. Right? If he overturns or attempts to overturn Joe Biden's pardons, then that's exactly what somebody else is going to do to him going down the line. He does not want that. I don't think anybody really wants that. But the president of the United States has the power to pardon basically anybody for any crime at any time. And there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. But Dr. Fauci went before the Senate today, and he immediately acknowledged that he will not be participating in this charade. He didn't call it a charade. I'm not calling it a charade. I think it's legitimate. I think he definitely needs to answer for some of the things that has happened. However, he is terrified that he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life if he does. So what he did is that he invoked the Fifth Amendment immediately in his opening statement. This is what I expected him to do. This is frankly what he needed to do, so that he can ensure that he basically is covered, right? So it was interesting because he has an attorney with him. He has a team of attorneys with him. The attorneys want to help. His attorney sits down next to him at the hearing. He was instructed not to sit next to him. He's supposed to sit in the row behind him, and the attorney basically politely refused and said he was going to sit there. During the hearing, the attorney tries to interject and interrupt the hearing, and eventually he was thrown out of the hearing, right? This is not a legal proceeding. The guy is testifying before Congress. He's pleading the Fifth Amendment. He's doing so with every single question that he is asked, and he's not giving any further issue with it, right? That's his right. That's what everybody's right is to do. And I'm sorry, but trying to circumvent that is irresponsible, regardless of his guilt. Here is the attorney trying to defend Dr. Fauci, I guess. I don't know what he's defending him from. This isn't a courtroom. There's no judge. There's no jury. He's just basically there to tell him that he can invoke the Fifth Amendment and move on with his life.
But the attorneys are not recognized. In fact, the attorney was told not to sit at the table, and he's not obeying that recommendation. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered. For a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
You can look at Fauci's face. Look at him. He's nervous. And then when they tell him to leave.
Lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
And he's kicked out. Got kicked out of the hearing. His own attorney got kicked out of the hearing.
Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half a dozen attorneys that he brought along today.
Rand Paul is not happy with Dr. Fauci. I don't blame him. I'm not happy with Dr. Fauci. I think the majority of the United States of America is unhappy with Dr. Fauci.
I served at the NIH.
But his attorney got kicked out shortly after making the opening statement. I think this is the opening statement where he directly attacks Rand Paul.
Member Peters, members of the committee, I served at the NIH for over 54 years, 38 of those as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Over that period, I proved that I believe in and respect the value of legitimate congressional oversight. In fact, I testified before and/or briefed Senate and House Senate and House committees well over 200 times over those 38 years. During and after the COVID pandemic, I have appeared multiple times for hearings in the Senate and the House, usually under oath, and sat for several days-long transcribed sworn interviews, answering questions about the very issues that are now the subject of this hearing. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary.
He's shaking so bad. He's shaking so bad. His hands are shaking. His voice is nice and calm.
Aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion. Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Yep, we knew that was coming.
To refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
Knew that was coming, and that needed to come. Well, it didn't need to come. He should cooperate, but he has cooperated. He has testified before Congress on Lord knows how many occasions. He's in a lot of trouble because there are a lot of people who are very angry and they're looking for somebody to blame. And he made himself the figurehead of this pandemic. Dr. Fauci made himself the face of the pandemic, the face of COVID-19, rather than sitting behind the scenes, making his suggestions, doing it, allowing the president to speak and doing that. He's the one who went out. He's the one who gave speeches. He's the one who went on news stations and drew all of this attention to him that he was the one that was basically in charge of the response. Sometimes it's better to just sit behind the scenes and live your life. But we're going to get into some of the questions because it was brutal. It was no holds bar, and it shouldn't be. It should be. It shouldn't be an easy cakewalk. Here is Senator Hawley asking questions of Dr. Fauci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, nothing says honesty like taking the fifth, huh, Doc? Let's try something. What day of the week is it today?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color's the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Let's just get one thing straight. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned, as you very well know. As the Supreme Court has been clear for a century and more, Brown versus Walker, 1896, when he has been pardoned, he may not stand upon his privilege. You know that. Your lawyers sitting behind you now shifting nervously in their chairs. They know it. This isn't about the Constitution. This isn't about the law. This is about contempt. Contempt for this body and contempt for the American people.
That is what they're going for. This is the plan from the Republican side of the House. He's been pardoned for anything. Can't get him on anything at the federal level. He's been pardoned. That's one. Two, you're going to call him before Congress. So what they wanted to do is they wanted him to come before Congress, have him testify, because you lose your protection when you lie about the crime. You have to be honest. If you're pardoned for murdering somebody, you can't lie about it. You have to tell the truth. You have to say, yes, I did it. So they're trying to trap him. They're trying to get him to testify so that they can say he's lying, because my inclination is that he will lie, because he did do some things that are definitely against the law, particularly with destroying documents with their emails about. They're trying to get him to be dishonest so that they can go after him for wavering the pardon. He's not doing that, because he's pleading the Fifth Amendment. So what they're doing is they're pulling up an old Supreme Court case, which is true and accurate, that I disagree with. It was a 5-4 decision, one swing the other way, and it would have got thrown out. Basically saying that if you've been pardoned, then if you talk about it, you're not incriminating yourself. Therefore, you can't invoke the Fifth Amendment. I think this is a very weak argument. I think that it is categorically wrong. But on the other hand, I think Dr. Fauci is 100% guilty of crimes against citizens of the United States, should be persecuted, but as an individual citizen has the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment. I think Senator Hawley is wrong. I think Rand Paul is wrong. And I think what they're trying to do is get him on something, because he should be gotten on something, frankly. So they're trying the best that they can so that they can say that they prosecuted Dr. Fauci. So what they're going to get him on is contempt. This is the plan. They knew he wasn't going to sit there and be honest and truthful and talk about everything that he did with all of the evidence, because it's overwhelming. He can't, because it destroys his public image. So they want to say, you don't have this privilege. The Supreme Court has made this decision. You are required to respond. And because you did not respond, you are now in contempt of this court. We're going to issue a subpoena for your arrest. Imagine the Constitution not being applied in the place it's supposed to be applied the most. The halls of Congress, where the Fifth Amendment does not apply if they don't like you, Or the Fifth Amendment, even worse than that, where the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply if you're guilty. The Fifth Amendment especially applies if you're guilty. Guilt or innocent has nothing to do with it. Nobody can force your confession. I think if they do this and this gets to the Supreme Court, I think the old ruling is going to be overturned, and it should be. Still, again, this does not make me a Fauci guy. I think he did horrible things. I think he's a criminal. I think he should be arrested, and I think he should go to jail. But I think protecting everybody's individual right to the Fifth Amendment is more important, so that the Democrats don't do this to you or somebody you love. They don't do it to Rudy Giuliani. They don't do it to J.D. Vance. They don't do it to countless other people. Tucker Carlson, whoever. Doesn't matter. That's not how it works. Individual rights are not selective. They don't apply to one and not the other. Regardless.
But I think I know why you're doing it. It's because you don't want to answer questions. It's because you did all kinds of terrible things. It's because during the pandemic, you got rich, didn't you? You got rich while people were dying, hundreds of thousands of Americans, over 1 million in the end, and you were getting rich. And not only were you doing that, you were using federal employees with taxpayer money to apply for and solicit cash prizes for you personally. Cash prizes totaling over $1 million. You did all of that during the pandemic, didn't you? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You remember Greg Folkers? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Your chief of staff is the answer. Do you remember Patricia Conrad? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
She was your personal assistant. And what were these individuals doing in the depth of the pandemic in November of 2020 when millions of Americans were suffering from COVID? What were they doing? I tell you what they're doing. Folkers was on your behalf soliciting and gathering information for a cash award. Let's look at it. We've got his email right here, right over my shoulder. Folkers says, I'm working on this nomination for the Dan David Award for Fauci. We need to beef up the COVID part. Do you have language in the can that you could share that delineates how we responded in new ways to COVID? He sends this to multiple federal employees. What was the Dan David Award? Do you remember, Doc?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
It was a $900,000 cash award. $900,000 cash award. And he got it because he used federal employees to get it. And this wasn't the only award, was it, Dr. Fauci? In fact, you applied for and received at least 8 other federal cash prizes on federal time using federal employees and federal resources. Here they are over my shoulder. Besides the Dan David Award, you've got the Partnership for Public Service, you've got the Adelson Prize, you've got the Smithsonian Award, you've got the National Academy of Medicine's Award, you've got the CDC Foundation. In fact, you turned your staff into a full-time application machine. You actually wrote to people and said, do you think maybe I'd qualify? And you got cash for all of this. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 employees, was it? In fact, you used 8 separate federal employees on federal time using federal resources to solicit cash awards. Isn't that true?
Doesn't matter. For all of that, if all of that is true, he's been pardoned. And there's nothing anybody can do about it.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Here they are right over my shoulder. Here's all of them. The people that you use, federal employees, so that you could go and get cash money. And the most hilarious part is that you weren't content to even dragoon them into applying for all of these cash awards. You then had them go out to the ethics agencies and ethics watchdogs and demand that you be able to get the money. That's right. We've got it in your emails. Your staff and employees on federal time, using federal resources, being paid with federal dollars, are soliciting cash for you. And then they're turning around and saying to the agency, we don't want just an answer. We want to get to yes, because Fauci wants the money. He wants it. We want to get to yes, and yes takes time. This is your chief of staff again, using federal email to pressure the agency's own ethics people so that you could get money, so that you could get rich. And it violated the law, didn't it, Dr. Fauci? Didn't it? It violated the law, didn't it?
Is that a question?
It is a question. You can answer. Go ahead.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Federal law, as you very well know, prohibits the solicitation of cash awards or other personal benefits for federal employees. And it certainly prohibits using your own employees to do this. 5 CFR section 2635-205B.
There's a million federal laws you can get Fauci on. That's why his pardon was so broad. You can get him on. You can get anybody on anything, but especially him. He literally broke the law repeatedly.
It says it right there in black and white. You cannot use federal resources, federal dollars, federal employees, federal offices, federal email, federal time to solicit cash awards. And you did all of it. And the worst part is thousands of people were dying while you were doing it. You were supposed to be the nation's doctor, and you're playing one on TV. But this is what you were doing with your time. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, I can see why. I can certainly see why. You know what I can't quite figure out is that why you were so obsessed with it, because you're already rich. I mean, and your scheme worked here. I mean, your net worth now is north of $12 million. You got over $1 million in cash awards during COVID, during a 12-month, 24-month span during COVID. $1 million you knocked down in cash money using federal resources. Now you're worth more than $12 million. You've got a pension that in its first year paid out north of $400,000 a year. 1 million people dead, you're getting rich. 1 million people dead, you're using federal employees to get cash awards for you. 1 million people dead, and you're here taking the fifth because you don't want to admit that what really happened in all that time was a multi-month, multi-year course of self-dealing. Isn't that true, Dr. Fauci?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, well, silence is admission.
No,
and here's
not.
the real thing. At the end of the day, it wasn't just about...
Silence is not admission. Refusing to answer a question is not admission. Pleading the fifth is not admission. It exists for a reason. To protect you from persecution. Not that I'm saying he's being persecuted. I think they're truly seeking justice for the millions of lives lost that were unnecessary.
About the money, really, was it? It was really about a power trip. I mean, through all of this, you want to be the most famous scientist in the world. You were so focused on getting every award and every drop of cash that you could, all because you wanted to be on TV. You wanted to be the sun god of science. You wanted to be the guy who was in charge of it all. You wanted to lambast Trump. You wanted to make sure that nobody else stole your spotlight. You wanted to be the guy. You had time to sit for InStyle magazine. Here's what you were doing with your time. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you can't answer questions for the American people. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you're here taking the fifth. You could sit for InStyle magazine and get $1 million in cash awards, but now the cat's got your tongue. I bet he does. I tell you what, here's my conclusion from all of this. This was really all about you the whole time. Somewhere along the way, you lost your way. You may have been a good public servant at one time. I don't know. But I can tell you from reading your emails now, from looking at what you did, how you used your employees, somewhere along the line, it became all about you. You became a narcissist and a megalomaniac and a liar. And you've lied to the American people, and you've lied to this body. And you've disgraced your profession by doing it. You called yourself the most famous scientist in the world. You've done more to harm science than anybody in my lifetime. And I hope you'll go home and write that in your diary.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One thing that he said there that is wholeheartedly and utterly true is that he has ruined science for generations. Nobody believes the federal government anymore. Nobody. I don't. Do you? The next time a serious infectious disease comes into the United States and it's actually serious and actually legit and people are dropping dead left and right and the government comes and the CDC comes and says, you need to take this vaccine, you need to put on this mask, what are you going to do? Yeah, I'm not falling for that again. So he's destroyed the credibility of the United States of America. Chef Lady says, my dad died because he believed this guy and got the jab, was gone 4 years. I'm so terribly sorry to hear for your loss. A lot of people did. A lot of people did. Millions of people. Millions of people. Michelle said, I agree. My mom had Alzheimer's and died of COVID in a nursing home by herself. I'm so sorry to hear that. Terrible. Those are just two examples of millions of examples. Millions of examples of people that died alone. They died with unable to hold their loved one's hand. They died unnecessarily because they were put on ventilators and they didn't want to listen that when you put somebody on a ventilator, that's basically the end of it. The actual way to treat it was to take them off of the ventilator. Doctors, medical doctors are on Twitter trying to get this out. Harvard graduated doctors are trying to get this out on Twitter to tell people, stop using ventilators. You're killing everybody. What did they do? Well, Dr. Fauci and the FBI went to Twitter and had these people's pages taken down because if it wasn't done by Fauci, if it wasn't said by Fauci, then it was wrong and you should be persecuted for it. Don't get me wrong. Dr. Fauci is a criminal. He should be in jail, but he has every right to invoke the Fifth Amendment, and so do you. Here is Senator Marino, who dropped the F-bomb today. Let's listen to this.
Can you do me a favor in the audience and stand up if during the time of the COVID pandemic, you were called a racist for calling the virus a Wuhan virus or the China virus? If you thought the 6-foot rule was total crap, if you thought the vaccine wasn't something that you should take, if you thought it was outrageous the way the mask policy was rolled out, if you were fired from your job for not taking that vaccine, including members of the military, if you thought closing schools was catastrophically stupid, and that you thought that during these times saying these things made you somehow a lesser human being. Dr. Fauci, can you just turn around and look at the people behind you? You're not willing to do that? That's not a question. It's not a question. To your lawyers, not a question. It's a request. All you have to do is look up from your lawyers and look at the people who were absolutely shamed for saying what we know now to be the truth. You can't even look at them?
We knew it was the truth then. We knew it was the truth then. We knew that this common sense would tell you that this little paper towel over your face isn't doing anything. I think this is the F-bomb video. Let's watch this.
It was about 6 years ago today that I decided I'm going to give up my businesses, sell them all, run for office, run for the United States Senate. Here I am sitting in front of you 6 years later saying, who the fuck do you think you were for doing that? It is a total disgrace what you did to this country. And if my Democrat colleagues are standing there defending you, I hope the voters of the United States of America watch the clips of every one of you doting on a guy who was more interested in being a celebrity than saving American people. I will make it my mission to make certain that every single one of those Democrats who did that will see that clip over and over and over again. Because there is no defense of what you did. You may have had a 50-plus year legacy of public service, but it ends in total and complete disgrace.
100%. Fauci. I think they're going to really get him on this. On this obstruction. They're going to try to anyway. What a coward that guy is. Yeah, I definitely agree. Senator Moreno was a killer today. He was. We got a couple of killers in the Senate that are doing a really, really, really good job. Here is Senator Moody. Let's hear what she had to say.
Tragic stories of people who lost loved ones during COVID and those that were denied a chance to say goodbye to their family members that were in hospitals or residing in nursing homes because of the COVID-19 protocols. Americans haven't forgotten the mandates, the adverse reactions to vaccines, the government misinformation, social media censorship, hotlines to tattle on their neighbors, the forced school closures, the tragic rise in suicides, or those businesses that were forced to close during lockdowns. Americans haven't forgotten the hundreds of billions of dollars spent by taxpayers for COVID relief, stolen by fraudsters who bought Rolls Royces and yachts. These were taxpayer dollars. Americans have lost trust in science and government after the COVID response.
I'm glad because now it's been exposed for what it actually was and what the government actually is. Things that I have been screaming from the top of my lungs, but I do this all day, every day for years, that your average American doesn't know and doesn't understand. This exposed it for what it truly is and how in a moment's notice, they could take everything you have away from you and there is no recourse to stop them. That is the problem with government today. Here is Senator Johnson.
I was going to ask you, I mean, were you carefully monitoring the safety surveillance systems like VAERS and vSafe that literally were deluged with complaints? You know, currently, worldwide, there have been almost 1.7 million adverse events reported to the VAERS system. Of those, over 39,000 were deaths. And of those deaths, 24% occur on the day of vaccination within 1 or 2 days. 24%, which, by the way, just happens to be the same percentage that a Rasmussen poll pointed out the American public believe 24% of the American public believe they know somebody who died of the experimental gene therapy. So again, I was certainly interested in asking you whether or not you were following this as carefully as I was. It's not my responsibility to follow safety surveillance systems, but I did. And by the way, when I published, this is actual government information. When I published it and people had me on their shows, they would be censored by Facebook. They would be deplatformed.
Uh-huh.
I think largely at the behest of the actions you took to make sure that disinformation wasn't spread. This wasn't disinformation. This was the truth.
Absolute freaking disaster. Absolute friggin' disaster. Ron Paul, I keep calling him Ron. It's Rand Paul. Well, here's Senator Johnson again.
So we have evidence that, in fact, you were fully aware of it and certainly approved if not authored it. So I was just simply asking you, I mean, is that true? I mean, did you literally lie to your own diary? Did you know of that letter sent out to governors about reopening county by county? And again, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask you to ask the witness to just answer that one simple question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
So we have evidence that, in fact,
That's what he's going to do. I don't know why you would expect anything else, especially after his opening statement. I don't know why you think you like any other result would come of it. This is Rand. Let's watch this clip. I'm not sure if we saw this one. Let's test it out.
Dr. Fauci, did the CIA ever transfer funds to NIH under an interagency agreement? On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I'm going to, but I need the long list of the questions. Dr. Fauci, did the NIH ever conduct research for or in coordination with any element of the intelligence community, CIA, ODNI? On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. The reason why these questions are important is, President Trump has done a ban, and we're glad that he did a ban on gain-of-function research. So we're better off than we were when we had an advocate serving as head of NIAID, an advocate for gain-of-function research. There is still, though, a question, though, whether or not the intelligence community is adhering to that order. There's a question of whether or not gain-of-function research is still ongoing. And these are important questions the American people deserve to know. Dr. Fauci, have you been read into any classified Department of Homeland Security program, any prospective special access program concerning gain-of-function research? On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. When we look at the research in China, the gain-of-function research that you've denied was gain-of-function, one of the things that startled the scientists when they saw COVID in the first couple of weeks was when they looked at the sequence of it, they said, oh my God, there's a furin cleavage site in it. And in this particular family of coronaviruses, the sarbecoviruses, they'd never seen this before.
I think Rand Paul is asking questions he already knows the answer to. Was the intelligence community involved in gain-of-function research? Particularly, that question is important because Fauci made this prediction, and it's been proven he has all of these connections to the intelligence community. I think that RFK Jr.'s book, The Real Dr. Fauci, alludes to that. But here is Judge Deneen talking about how Fauci predicted the pandemic before Trump's election.
How is it that Fauci predicted in 2017 that President Trump would face a pandemic? If he knew this, why didn't he develop a responsible method for this virus 4 years ago? He explicitly said that President Donald Trump would face a crisis and a pandemic unlike anything we have seen.
If there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. Now, the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with. And the mistake that so many people have made is something that several of our panelists have already referred to, and that is a failure to look beyond our own borders in the issue of the globality of health issues, not only things that are there that will come here, but surprises that we have. History tells us that we will definitely get surprised in the next few years.
Governor Bush.
Thank you all
Very interesting.
very much. The next president is going to be confronted with an unforeseen challenge. That's almost certain. It could be a pandemic, a major natural disaster, or an attack on our country. The question for South Carolinians and Americans is, who do you want to have sitting behind the big desk in the Oval Office?
I love Jeb Bush. Probably one of the best Florida governors that ever existed. So Rand Paul is leading this charge. I love that he's leading this charge. I love Rand Paul. He's like my favorite senator, for sure. Although I definitely disagree with him on the Fifth Amendment thing, and that's okay. I'm not going to agree with everybody. But, you know, Fauci is he's not a very good person. He's not very well liked. Here's RFK Jr. talking about Fauci.
He lied about masks. He lied about social distancing. He lied about the transmission. He lied about natural immunity. He lied about the capacity, as you just said, of the vaccine to prevent infection. He got vaccinated a very, very public press conference in January of 2020. And then 5 months later, he had, and this is the first time that we knew this from the diary, he had a pulmonary infarction, which is one of the adverse events that NIH, CDC, and FDA said are expected from the vaccine. He never told anybody. He got treated for it privately by the best doctors in America. At the same time, he was telling everybody that that was not an adverse event.
Is there anything else we're missing from these diaries that has not been released that you can share with us tonight?
I don't think, I mean, I have to say a lot of this stuff is in my book, but based upon other documents. But there's something very dramatic, even for me, of seeing him write it in his own journal, confessing to being wrong, to lying about all
also
this
loving his own press. I mean, they're going on and on. Well, I'm the most famous person in the world, internationally and nationally. I can't even go out to a restaurant because people want to take pictures of me.
He's been a problem for a very long time. I don't know how he got a pardon. I'm actually kind of confused as to why Joe Biden would give Dr. Fauci a pardon. I mean, I really, I'm genuinely confused. Here is a Fox News report.
I've been watching this. A couple of things. I put this up on my X account, but I want you to hear it. Know the facts about Biden, former President Biden's Fauci pardon. Fauci is protected from any offenses against the United States he may have committed or taken part in between January 1st of 2014 and January 19th of 2025, arising from or in any manner related to his work. Now, you've heard some talk about this pleading the Fifth and how that would work out. There are some exceptions. And by the way, the titles that he had are all covered. Director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, White House Coronavirus Task Force and White House COVID-19 Response Team, and Chief Medical Advisor to the President, President Trump at one point, and President Biden at another. The pardon does not cover this. And this may be why you see him trying to use the pleading the Fifth on just about every question. It does not cover the pardon, the one that Biden gave him that protects him so much. It does not cover state criminal prosecutions. So that means states can engage if they want. Future crimes.
Well, yeah, no federal pardon protects states, right? That's like a governor pardoning somebody in Florida and then them not getting prosecuted but in California or by the federal government. It's over its authority. The president has priority over federal crimes, not state crimes.
Congressional investigations and requirements for Fauci to testify. So he's there, but he doesn't have to take the questions, so he thinks. And it does not protect him from prosecution for perjury if he lies under oath after receiving the pardon. Now, that may be the point. Because whether he lies intentionally or accidentally or whatever it would mean, not covered by the pardon. I think all of that is worth knowing today because he has put up kind of a wall around himself with pleading the Fifth. But that doesn't mean he's telling the truth in every point. Trust me, those attorneys he keeps turning around and talking to and asking what to do when he knows his directive is to plead the Fifth. He's making sure there are no exceptions, that there's no exposure. It's fascinating to watch this. But what's important is what you saw Senator Ashley Moody do and so many others in the room, Josh Hawley as well, Senator Hawley, is get on the record with what we know is the truth and his role in it.
That's all they can do is basically publicly shame him. But, you know, that's the reason why the Fifth Amendment applies. And, you know, they're going to try to, I'm very surprised at Rand Paul. Very, very surprised at Rand Paul. Here is an interview with him in the hallway after the hearing. It's 3 hours long.
Now live.
There is an argument, this has probably never been tested legally, if you've been granted complete immunity. We didn't grant him immunity, but the President Biden granted him complete immunity. With the grant of immunity, do you still need Fifth Amendment protections, or do they apply? So, yes. And telling that all he had to do today was tell the truth. If he testified and told the truth, even if he admitted to destroying thousands of records, which we think happened, there's no penalty that attaches. It would just be the truth.
How do you respond to?
Yeah, but then he could be persecuted by individual states. He could be held civilly liable. He's allowed to, dude, I'm sorry, Ryan. I've never disagreed with Rand Paul one time in the history of the world. Total disagreement. Not even close. Don't even understand where he's coming from on this. I know the Republicans are going to jump on board and they're all going to be chewing me out in the comments. I get it. I get it. Take a step back. Think about this for a second. You do not get to select when somebody can invoke a constitutional right. I don't care what it is. Speech, the press. You have a right to not incriminate yourself. Period. Full stop. End of discussion. No loopholes, no nuance, nothing. I do not care. You're driving home from work, cop pulls you over, says, do you know why I pulled you over? I'd like to invoke the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. I don't answer questions. Can the cop say, well, this isn't a criminal citation. It's a civil citation. It's not criminal. So therefore, the Fifth Amendment doesn't work. So you're required to tell me why I pulled you over. No. I am not. I have the right to remain silent and not incriminate myself, answer any questions, or even look at you. And I don't have to say it for every question. I could go in and say, for the record, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege on any and all questions that are asked to me, and that is my official response. I'm not going to repeat myself. Please proceed. Would you like me to stay? Okay. And then I'll just play on my phone. That's the benefit of being an American. That's why criminals have been very successful.
How do you respond to his comments that you have an unhinged obsession with him?
I think if you look at all of the questions that were asked, they're all very, very serious questions. You know, one of the questions, was about the particular type of furin cleavage site, that its codons were CGG. This was actually seen by a Nobel laureate, David Baltimore. I don't know what his political partisanship is, but a famous microbiologist or molecular chemist who said that that was the smoking gun that made him think that it came from the lab. All of these were scientific questions. There were some questions about, being him entertaining and advocating with government employees for monetary prizes and awards. But that's a legitimate oversight question. If he was using government employees to apply for $1 million award, I think that's a legitimate question. I heard very few questions today that I would say were unhinged or politically motivated. I don't think any of the questions that I put forward, they were on destroying records and whether or not the research in Wuhan was dangerous. See, in the past, we've quibbled with him over what is the definition of gain of function. He said, but didn't meet the exact definition. I think the American people want to know, was it dangerous research and should it have been funded? And that gets away from a semantics argument. And I think we could have gone there. Look, for the first year of this pandemic, from 2020 all the way into the summer of 2021, I didn't really pay much attention to Anthony Fauci other than his prescriptions about masks and things like that. But as far as the origins, I didn't really get interested in it until I read an article by Nicholas Wade in, I think, the spring of 2021. That's when I became intrigued that, wow, we could have been funding this. So I was completely neutral on Anthony Fauci until we began asking questions, but until we began seeing the revealed emails that what they say in private was different than in public. In private, he said, wasn't the wet market. In public, he said for 5 years, it was the wet market. In private, his virologist said, looks like the virus has been manipulated. In public, they said, it's not even plausible that it could have been. So this contradiction between public and private is really what's damaged.
Mr. Chair, where does accountability go from here?
He's exercising a constitutional right. Are you saying he's not legally allowed to do that?
No, I think the courts will have to figure out whether.
See, that's a great question. That's a good report. It's a great question. If you didn't hear it, there was a lot of questions at the time. He says he's invoking his constitutional right. Are you saying that he does not have the right to do that?
Mr. Chair, where does accountability go from here?
He's exercising a constitutional right. Are you saying he's not legally allowed to do that?
No, I think the courts will have to figure out whether or not, if you have a complete pardon, whether you have liability against incrimination. Can you incriminate
irrelevant?
Yourself
Doesn't matter.
If you have a pardon, I think it's going to be a question for the courts.
Where does accountability go from here? Why not subpoena the assistant and some of the other individuals mentioned?
There will be questions, and she will be subpoenaed for a deposition. Probably not a big full hearing, but she will be asked about that. Her email that she deleted tons of emails was in 2018. We find a scattering of them, but we also feel confident that hundreds, if not thousands, were deleted over a 40-year period, and that we just don't have access to those. Because you have access to what's left, you can't always determine what was removed. But I think it's an important question.
Would you hold Dr. Fauci in contempt? Do you think that you would have the votes in the Senate to do that?
That's the vote that will happen in committee next week. It will be in contempt of Congress. We believe that with his liability, his immunity from criminal liability, that he didn't need to hide behind the Fifth Amendment, and that maybe the Fifth Amendment doesn't attach when you have a pardon in place. That'll be a legal question.
Unreal.
But the question on contempt.
That is an unreal and shocking position from Rand Paul. I am floored that he even considers that as a position. Fauci is guilty of sin. Guilty. 100% agree. Should probably be in prison for the rest of his life. I think he enriched himself. I think he knew that the advice he was giving was wrong. I think he tried to cover up the funding he gave to the Wuhan lab for gain-of-function research. I'm disappointed. I am extremely disappointed in Rand Paul right now in this moment.
Be voted on, and then there's a question of whether or not the Department of Justice will take that up. I've recommended before for his criminal prosecution, and neither the Biden DOJ nor the Trump DOJ have taken it up. All I can do is recommend prosecution. I can't initiate a prosecution.
But do you think
Did you find anything incriminating in the diary entries?
I think to me there's a lot of interest, obviously, that he was using 8 personnel in NIH to advocate for monetary rewards. And when there was a question of the monetary rewards, he was responding, we have to get to yes on this. And it's not an insignificant amount of money. We're not talking about a $100 award and a dinner certificate. We're talking about $1 million that not only was he advocating for himself, he was asking others to fill out applications for him to get the $1 million prize. He specifically wanted the money and wanted the waiver. I think it is illegal to use your employees to try to get monetary awards. So yes on that. The other most important thing that came from the diaries is that privately in January of 2020, he was already acknowledging that it didn't come from the wet market. Now, that's just dishonesty. That may not be a crime, but he knew in January 2020 that the earliest cases did not come from the wet market. They came from somewhere else. But you saw the clips. That was just what we found in about 24 hours. We found maybe 10 different clips of him saying came from the wet market, wet market, wet market. Why is he doing that? It's not just an innocent argument. The wet market points to it being of nature. If it's not from the wet market, it might be from the lab. Who funded the lab? See, he's been self-interested. People, and many, we won't say who they are, but many in the media treated everything he said as disinterested. He was self-interested from the very beginning. He was self-interested in making sure that nobody concluded it came from the lab. He didn't treat them equally. He was like, holy, you know what? If it came from the lab, I funded the lab. I could be responsible for this entire pandemic.
Correct.
And so he
100%.
He, I think, obscured any facts that would have led towards concluding. But look, it's not just me. If you were to ask, 100 scientists are in this area, there's a split in them. And even the ones who say they might still think it's nature are saying, like Christian Anderson, I'm still 30% it might be, and maybe we overstated our case. The fact that the virologist that wrote Proximal Origins, that he commissioned, he edited, and then he displayed from the White House, the fact that the authors of that have doubts really should lead us all to have some doubts. I got one or two more. You already had one.
Can I ask you about the president's praise? He has said some positive comments about you. Leading up to this hearing, did you talk to the White House at all?
I didn't, but I always love getting praise from the president. One more here.
Senator, if there is so much there, and you referred him to the DOJ, to the Trump DOJ, why have they not taken anything up against him, especially since they have taken it up against one of his colleagues?
Because he's been pardoned. Well, I think the case against David Morenz is pretty significant. I think when Senator Scott pointed out that he threw his friend under the bus, David Morenz has eaten at the house. He's broken bread with Fauci. They were friends for 20 years. His chief assistant for 20 years. What did Fauci say about him in the investigate the house? Hardly knew him. Worked in another building. Didn't come to our policy meeting. He downplayed the association because the things that Morenz was caught saying were so clearly illegal and unsavory. But here's my question. I wonder what David Morenz today, under indictment, has to say about Anthony Fauci. So I think there is the potential that David Morenz has information that would be very interesting to all of us. But as far as who gets to determine things, it's like your question on the pardon. I'm not the final word on that. I can say that I think there are questions whether you have a pardon, whether the Fifth Amendment applies when you have a pardon. That is for a court to decide. So the DOJ will have to look at that. And I'm not here to condemn the DOJ. They have to make legal decisions. Do they think they can make it they can make it stick? Will they be dismissed immediately? Will it be seen by the public as frivolous? They will have to make those decisions. I do know that a great number of the population feels that Anthony Fauci was dishonest because of what he was saying in private, was different or the opposite.
I agree that Fauci's a monster. But saying that he does not have a Fifth Amendment right even after you would be setting a precedent. You would be setting a precedent to give the government power to take away a constitutional right in a circumstance of where, oh, well, it can't be held liable. Well, he can. He can be held civilly liable. He can be held state liable, which is still criminally liable. The president's pardon doesn't protect him if Texas decides to go after him and say, hey, in this state, you invoke this policy. 100,000 people died. That's 100,000 counts of manslaughter. We're going to go ahead and take you up and sentence you to death. Here is Fauci leaving the meeting. Obviously very upset, very stressed. His entire world is crumbling around him. It's kind of leaked out what happened and what he did, and people are not happy. I mean, this guy can't go out in public anywhere. There's no way this guy is going to go anywhere in the world where people are not going to know who he is and immediately blame him. His recommendations and his policies spread throughout the world, and it hurt people.
Dr. Anthony Fauci left Capitol Hill after invoking the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times during a hearing longtime critic Senator Rand Paul called about the COVID-19 pandemic.
You did not tell the American people the full story.
Senator Paul has accused Fauci of downplaying the origins of the virus and his connection to a lab in China. Paul has pushed the theory the virus leaked from that facility instead of spreading naturally.
Can you explain?
Well, it's the Wuhan virus. That's what it is. But he covered it up. He covered it up because he's the one who funded the gain of function research, and he is the one who could be held liable for it. Here's Rand Paul on Fox News after the hearing.
You know, I was disappointed. I had hoped that he would come forward and perhaps apologize. 1 million Americans died, and many people, myself included, believe that this virus came from a lab that was funded by the U.S. government. Decision for that funding came from Anthony Fauci. A terrible mistake, maybe one of the greatest mistakes in modern medical history, to fund this dangerous research in a less than safe lab in a totalitarian country. But I think what we did learn is we saw a constellation of what he was saying privately and then what he was saying publicly. You know, I was disappointed. I had hoped that he...
The diaries are the smoking gun because he's admitting to lying about everything. He admitted it.
Refused to answer any questions.
Shame. Shame this man. He should be. And he's forever. I mean, he's destroyed. His whole life is destroyed. Here is Rand Paul. I think this is when he says he's going to hold him in contempt here. Let's watch this.
Let's be clear today, you know, what we've seen. I really did want to hear from Dr. Fauci. I wanted to hear perhaps an apology, perhaps some semblance of being sorry for what happened or that judgment errors were made. We didn't hear any of that. But he was subpoenaed here to testify, refused to answer any questions, even after being directed by the chair and being advised of the law requiring him to do so. He has cited a privilege that is unsupported because of his blanket pardon and because he waived the privilege by testifying at the start. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comply with the law. Limited to the period of your pardon, at any point between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025, did you destroy any federal record or tell anyone else to?
Under the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that you have a unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
My question was limited to the period of your pardon only. I find your objection unsupported and direct you to answer the question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon.
It's a privilege. Did you hear him call it a privilege? It's not your rights are not privileges.
And after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote next week on a resolution certifying your contempt.
The son of the pinnacle of freedom, Ron Paul. It's not a privilege. It's a right that belongs to everybody. This is the problem with government. This is the problem with government, and this is why checks and balances are so important. So important. Because you can sit there and you can scream at the top of your lungs, I'm for individual rights, I'm for individual liberty, and then the second you get any bit of power, oh, the Fifth Amendment don't apply here, dude. Nah, man. You can't invoke that shit. What's wrong with you, man? You think you can not answer my question? I'm going to direct you to incriminate yourself. Man, that's disappointing. I'll never forget that, though. Michelle, I'm no expert, but is a class action lawsuit a possibility? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, the problem is that this is the truth, that big government is so intertwined with big business that when they came out with this rushed vaccine, yes, it was a rush vaccine. It was Operation Warp Speed by Donald Trump in his first term that gave them freedom from liability because they knew that the vaccine was thwarted, and they said, this is really not ready to go. I mean, it should work, but it's really not ready to go. So if we give this to you, we need to make sure that nobody can sue us. And the federal government said, yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair. Go ahead. Then they get this waiver of liability where nobody can sue them. They start injecting people, but they're only injecting people who volunteer. Then Joe Biden comes along with the vaccine mandate and says, everybody is getting the vaccine. Everybody. I don't care who they are. I don't care where they work. The federal law is you are required to get a vaccine. Well, so much for my body, my choice, Democrats. Your body, my choice. So now you got a forced vaccination where you can't go after big business because they're intertwined with big government for any liability that happens to you or your child. And then you got people in the CDC, like Anthony Fauci, getting kickbacks for stock options or how much money they get per vaccine issued and sold, and then the federal government pays the bill. Fauci gets rich. All these people get multi-billionaire rich because they're lobbying governments and saying, force the vaccine. Everybody's got to get vaccinated because they're getting paid. That's where this country is. That's where this country is. That's where this country has been led. And we've led it there. Because the second the Republicans get in power, nobody wants to hold them accountable. All these right-wing political podcasters, I haven't watched it yet because this all happened today. But I can assure you, you're going to see the echoing. The echoing. Well, the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply to Fauci. He got a pardon. How could you say that? And then the birds are going to chirp. They're going to chirp. They're going to chirp. They're going to chirp. And they're going to take away a fundamental right that is there to protect you from persecution. They're going to find a way to weasel it in and take it away. "100% wrong on the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. 1,000,000% wrong. Not even close. Not a rational mind in this world could make that argument. You do not waive your right to your constitutional rights because the government doesn't like it. It's specifically there to protect you from senators and congresspeople. Regardless, I don't care if you're guilty. I could care less. That's what it's there for, to protect the innocent, and it's better than 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be put to their own death to the sounds of trumpets blaring in a city square. Because if you allow these slow and gradual encroachments to grow in power and more power, that is going to be the end result for anybody who opposes it. That if the government is seeking to persecute you because you posted something online that went against their federal policy on vaccines or masks, and then they bring you into a room and say, well, the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply if national security is involved. That's right. That's right. You can't say those things. Your free speech doesn't apply here because national security people could die because of what you said. So therefore, it doesn't apply. So your speech isn't protected. It's hate speech. We just saw it. I just covered it last night. Shiloh Hendricks said the N-word, was persecuted by the government on probation, could seek jail time because she said the N-word, didn't threaten anybody, didn't promise to hurt or kill anybody, just said the word. It is here. It is now. You are living in tyranny. But you're just a frog who got placed in a pot of cold water, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then it just gradually got warmer, and your blood adjusted, and one day it won't, and you will just boil to death. But if you took that same frog and you threw it in hot water, it would jump right out. These are things that you have to police no matter what side of the aisle is doing it. I'm a lifelong Republican. Lifelong Republican. My first vote was George W. Bush. Lifelong. Been it my whole life. I named my daughter Reagan after Ronald Reagan. But your responsibility as a citizen, your responsibility to your children, to your children's children, and to the future of this country is to the individual liberties that we possess. If you do not protect them, no matter who is on the side of the aisle is violating them, you will lose them. Period. And once they are gone, you never, ever get them back. It's gone forever. You can't walk back the government on taking away your rights. It's not real. It's not going to happen. You think they're just going to say, oh, well, temporarily. Oh, you know what we're going to do? So we really need to pay for this stuff that we have. So we're just going to do, we're going to tax your income. Oh, no. Relax. Only for like 3 months. Yeah, just a little while. That's it. We're just going to do it for a little while to get this money. It's never going to be permanent. It's not a tax. It's a donation. It's voluntary. We're never will this be permanent. What happened? You got an income tax because we allowed them to do it. People look at you like you're crazy. I argue with these liberals in the comments every day. Check out some of my posts and I just argue with them. People are like, don't do that. Don't interact with them. No, I'm going to just tell them they're dumb because they are. And they get people, oh yeah, get rid of the income tax. Who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for your police officers? Well, not the income tax. Your local property tax would, but you don't understand the tax system because you're an idiot. Mr. Liberal 18-year-old in his mom's basement eating Twinkies with purple hair and lip rings. It is so important, and I am devastatingly disappointed with Rand Paul. He's not serious. He knows he's wrong, and that's even worse. He knows it can't be done. He knows that they're not going to waive the privilege, but he's pushing for it, knowing that, and that's even scarier. I'm going to write him a letter today and express my opinion on that. But thank you guys for tuning in. Do not forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. We are live Monday through Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you're here to tune in to check it out. I think it's a good show, but I'm a little biased. I'm a little biased. You can always call into the show. 561-786-2916. Share your opinion. Tell me you hate it. Tell me you disagree. Tell me you think the Fifth Amendment should be able to be revoked if you have a presidential pardon. Tell me whatever you want. Everybody's welcome here. As my great friend Matt Spear at the Don't Unfriend Me show says, we can disagree, we can agree, just don't unfriend me. It's a great show. You should check it out. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to drop this to the podcast right now. Right now, I'm going to drop it. If you don't listen to the show on the podcast, I know some people come in, I see you in 10, 15, 20 minutes, then you leave, and then you can maybe come back like 45 minutes later. In your car on the way to work, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, Podbean, like you name it. Just listen to it. Listen to it on your way to work. Download it. Leave a review. Visit ryanfsamuels.com. Make sure you sign up for the blog or the news section. We're writing news articles now. You can reach me. If you go to ryanfsamuels.com, you can find a way to reach me. And if you would like to write an article, we will look it over and see if maybe we can publish it for you and get your name out there. But thank you for tuning in. I am so grateful to have all of you as fans of the show. Coincidentally, I started this the day Joe Biden came out and did his vaccine mandate speech. I said, screw this. We need to use our First Amendment rights to speak out against this. And it's come full circle now. I mean, I think I have 115,000 followers on Facebook. The podcast gets tens of thousands of followers. I've had Donald Trump Jr., Sarah Palin, the Hodge twins, Ted Nugent all endorse the show. What started as me just venting into 10 people on Facebook has turned into, I think, last week we had 4 million views. So that's awesome. Appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will be live again tomorrow night, same time, 9 p.m. We will see you then. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless our troops. And God bless the United States of America. Good night.